Hey everybody, welcome back to Whiteboard Finance. My name is Marco and I'm here to help you master your money and prepare for the next upcoming recession based on this indicator. Thanks to Policy Genius for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. So we're sitting in a deeply inverted yield curve, which has typically preceded every single recession since the 1980s. And also if the yield curve remains inverted for, I believe, 90 days or more, it's 100% been an indicator that a recession is coming within the next, I'd say, 0 to 18 months, which I'll show you in this video. So if you didn't watch my last video where I bought $50,000 worth of T-bills and I briefly mentioned the yield curve, go check that video out. But for those of you that don't know what the inverted yield curve is, I'll explain this very quickly. So the inverted yield curve is actually the unusual drop of yields on longer term debt going below yields on shorter term debt of the same credit quality. So if you just look at this very simple chart right here, on the y-axis you have yield, basically what you're yielding for that asset or for that debt. And then on the x-axis, you have maturity, meaning how long is this thing going to come until maturity. So if you remember in my last video with the T-bill video, like the 30-year bonds were significantly less than like the 4 or 8 week T-bill of the same credit quality. So let's take a look at how we even measure this, or let's look at real life examples of what an inverted yield curve is. So the way they measure this, and this is from the St. Louis Federal Reserve, this is completely updated. Right here we have the 10-year Treasury constant minus the 2-year Treasury constant. So typically the 10-year should be yielding more than the 2-year, and when it doesn't, that typically signifies something wrong with the plumbing of the economy or the plumbing of the financial system. There's a reason why these things become inverted, and again, this is why it's such a good indicator of upcoming recessions. So if you look at this black line, this showing you 0%, okay? That's right dead smack in the middle. This line should usually be above the blue line should be above the black line, and when it goes below it, that is when the yield curve is indeed inverted. So if you take a look at these gray bars, these indicate recessions, and if you look at the thickness of the gray bar, that just shows you how long the recession lasts. So let's take a look at these real-life examples. So the yield curve becomes inverted right around, let's say, October of '79. It dips down even lower, but then you have the recession starting in basically January of '80. If you look at this yield curve, it dips down to basically July of '81. Recession starts right around there. If you look at here, you have the yield curve dipping down in March of '89. Recession starts in basically July of '90. This example for the dot-com bubble, yield curve becomes inverted March of 2000. March of 2001, that's when the recession officially starts. This one, November of 2006, the Great Financial Crisis. Inverted yield curve happens in November of '06. Financial crisis starts right around November, December of 2007. And then very quickly, we did have a brief inverted yield curve in August of 2019. And then we had cerveza sickness, which was a very short-lived recession, but it was in fact a recession itself. So if I go all the way to today, if I go to February of 2023, we're sitting at negative 0.77. This is the steepest the yield curve has been inverted since basically September of '81. Okay, so you can do the math on that 42 years later. So what does this mean? Are we still dipping? Is the yield curve going to become more inverted? And what happens after this? Okay, so very quickly, let's take a look at this short video to show you how deeply the yield curve has become inverted. So if you take a look at this chart on the y-axis, these are euro-dollar futures yield, the percentage. On the x-axis, this is time, okay? So you can see it starts in 2023, this is where you should be focusing on, and it goes all the way out to 2031. And you can see here, this source is from barchart.com. This was actually done in November of 2022. So if you look at the top right-hand corner, you can actually see the date right here moving. Right now, we're basically in the summer of 2022, and this will go until basically about November of 2022. So this video is a couple months old, but it hammers home the point. If you look at these colors down here in the bottom right, the more red it gets or the more orange it gets, that means the yield curve is becoming more inverted, which you can see right here. So it stops at November 2nd, which is above 5%. We've only gotten more and more deeper since then. So in the next slide, I want to talk to you about the last 8 recessions being preceded by an inversion of the yield curve. But what I want to talk about is the lead when it starts versus when the recession actually starts after the yield curve inverts. But before that, let's get into a word today from our sponsor, Policy Genius. If you have a family, you know how much your loved ones depend on you. In a worst case scenario, you wouldn't want them to worry about money. A good life insurance policy can give you peace of mind. We all hope we never need life insurance, but mortgage payments, debt payments, childcare, and other expenses, they don't disappear when you're gone. My wife and I personally used Policy Genius to find the right term insurance for us and our family after our daughter was born. Policy Genius was built to modernize the life insurance industry. Their technology makes it easy to compare life insurance quotes from top companies like AIG and Prudential in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $39 per month for $2 million of coverage. Some options offer coverage in as little as a week and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Their licensed agents are not incentivized to recommend one insurer over another, so you can trust their guidance. There are no added fees, and your personal information is private. No wonder they have thousands of five-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. Your loved ones deserve a financial safety net. You deserve a smarter way to find and buy it. Head to policygenius.com/whiteboardfinance or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. Okay, thank you for sitting through that. It helps me pay the bills. Haven't asked you guys for anything in 5 years of doing this, so thank you for that. So let's take a look at this chart from Charlie Bilello. So you can see right here the inverted yield curve, which we just talked about. This is the 10-year minus the 3-month. So you can see right here we have the recession starts. So you have January of 70, December of 73, February of 80, going all the way to March of 20. Right now we're sitting in these question mark boxes. You can see when the recession ends. You can see if the inverted yield curve was happening before the recession. It's yes for all of them. And then you can see when the first yield curve inversion happened. So this is what I want to talk about in this slide. So for the 70 recession, it actually inverted in November of 65. So this was 50 months. For the 73 recession, you can see it inverted in June of 71, which was 30 months. For the February 80 recession, it actually inverted in August 78, so this is 18 months, so a year and a half. And then the rest are right around a year, year and a half, almost 2.5 years. Then you have 2 years, then you have 1 year. So our first yield curve happened based on this chart, based on the 10-year minus the 3-month. This happened in October of 2022. So if we're sitting in February of 2023, you can do simple math. You have October, November, December, January, February. So we're sitting at about 5 months right here, okay? This is basically telling us that anywhere from 6 to, 40 months from now, we're going to see some sort of recession. So I know that isn't, a crazy tight time period, but just based on these numbers, more realistically, it's probably going to be anywhere from 11 to 30 months. So this may happen in 2024. It may happen in 2023. We just don't know. But I think this is an important chart to give you some realistic expectations. So this next chart isn't specifically about the yield curve, but it is a super important factor, which I've talked about some of my videos in the summer when I was doing them with my research analyst, Joe Consorti. This is a huge indicator. This is the United States ISM manufacturing new orders. You can see when it dips below this yellow bar right here, you can see some severe recession. So you have the stagflationary recession. This was in basically 74, 75. Then you have the double dip recession. You have the savings and loan crisis. You have the tech bubble in the 2000s. You have the great financial crisis right here in 07, 08, 09. Then you have the cerveza sickness, which we talked about. We are now reaching down below those levels again. So this added into the mix with the inverted yield curve is basically another strong recession indicator. This is another one I wanted to talk about. This is the U.S. yield curve versus economic cycle indicators. So the black line is the U.S. yield curve. This is the 10-year minus the 2-year, which I showed you earlier from the St. Louis Fed. And then the blue line is the unemployment rate. So the interesting thing is you can see how unemployment ebbs and flows over time, but it almost always follows the yield curve, which is pretty interesting, or vice versa. It's almost like a one-to-one relationship, except for right here in 2003. And then also right here in like 19 or 20, but this was a huge global pandemic, so this one's kind of an outlier. But you can see pretty much since 85, they've pretty much been one-to-one. So when you see this dipping below, it's almost another indicator of, hey, what's going to happen to the unemployment rate, right? Well, right now we're sitting at a super low unemployment rate, which is typically preceded by a recession. And then finally, this is James Lavish. He just posted this, a few hours ago. He's just basically reinforcing what this whole video is about. So he talks about how when the yield curve inverts, which are the red areas, and 12 to 18 months later, we typically have a recession, which are the blue areas. He says it looks like clockwork. So he's saying that they inverted on July 5th. I'm not sure what type of yield curve he's using. I think he's using the 10-year, 2-year, because you can see right here where my cursor is, that's what it says. The other one said October. But either way, we're somewhere in that 24-month range where recessions do happen once the yield curve inverts. So this video is not meant to be like fear-mongering or anything like that. My whole channel is about just educating you. Some people already know about the yield curve. Some people have no idea what the yield curve even is. But charts have proven time and time again that when this thing inverts, and it inverts for a long period of time, specifically 90-plus days, which we're definitely at, it's been 100% of a recession coming shortly thereafter. So again, it may be 12 to 18 months later, it may be 30 months later. We're already sitting in about 5 months, I mentioned earlier. So it just depends, you guys. So what I would like to know in the comments down below, what are you guys doing? How are you planning? Are you guys sitting on the sidelines? Are you guys investing? Are you dollar cost averaging? Are you building your war chest? What are you guys doing with your money? Based on my last videos, you can already see what I'm doing with my money. I dollar cost average every week because I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm also sitting on a lot of dry powder, and I also bought 50 grand worth of T-bills, yielding right around 4.7% risk-free. So you may want to look into if you're scared to invest, or if these types of recessions scare you. It's actually the opposite. That's when you should be investing the most heavily. But based on human psychology, people do the exact opposite. They buy in when things are skyrocketing, and they panic sell when things are going down. So let me know in the comments below, what are you guys doing to invest? Thank you so much, and have a prosperous day.